Okay, so this is the first lesson where we are going to be using operations with negative integers. And so your goal for today is I can multiply integers with the same sign and with different signs. I do need you to add something into your goal here though. I need you to write I can multiply and divide. I forgot to add that into the goal. Okay, so you're going to actually learn how to multiply and divide today with negative numbers. Now, the rules for multiplying and dividing are the same, so we're going to work with both of them at the same time. When we go to do addition and subtraction, they're actually a lot harder than multiplication and division, and so we're going to do those separately. All right, so we have a couple pieces of important vocabulary. Some of these may actually be review. You should know these, but just in case, we will review them. So when we're talking about multiplication, you're going to hear the word product. And product is the answer to a multiplication problem, okay? So 2 times 2 is 4. The number 4 is the product. It's the answer to this multiplication problem. When we move over here to division, you're going to hear the word quotient. Quotient is the answer to a division problem. So product, answer to a multiplication problem, and quotient is the answer to a division problem. So down here I have 20 divided by 10 equals 2. This right here, that is the quotient. Okay? We have 2 other words in division that we use. One is called the dividend. That is the number being divided, and that's going to be the first number. And I kind of like to think about it this way. The dividend is the number that's going to be chopped up into pieces, because dividing, when you divide, you're separating a number into different pieces. And so which number is being chopped up? The dividend. That's always going to be the first number. Then we have the divisor. That's the number that you're dividing by, okay? How many pieces are you chopping up? Or how many pieces are you chopping into? I'm sorry. So the second number in a division problem is going to be the divisor. And those are just some important things to know as we go into some examples. All right, so when we show multiplication and division, most of you are going to be familiar with this right here for multiplication and with this right here for division. But there's actually many different ways that we show multiplication and division. And I'm going to use those constantly throughout today's lesson and also throughout the year. So it's important that you begin to get familiar with them. So if we're only focusing on multiplication first, you're familiar with using the X as a times symbol. The reason why we don't always use the X is because when we start to get into later units where we're doing something like 2x plus 2y, and we're adding in, these letters are called variables, this is actually the letter x, and if we did 2x times 2y, it would look like 2xx. And so it's important to know that we don't always use the x. What you will see me use frequently is this dot right here. And you just want to make sure that the dot is big enough to be seen. Sometimes your periods get lost at the end of sentences. So we also use the dot. Then you'll sometimes see things in parentheses, and they're next door to each other with no space in between or no other operation in between. So there's no plus sign or minus sign in between them. When you have 2 numbers next door to each other, that means multiplication. This guy right here, you'll usually never see it handwritten like that. This will usually be for the computer. So when you're putting an answer into IXL, or if you're working, or if you're creating a problem, in a Word document or something like that, you can use the star to indicate multiplication. All right, moving on to division next. So again, our division sign is the most clear and the most popular way to show division. However, we can also show it 2 other ways. So this slash bar right here is often used on the computer, okay? Just like with the star with multiplication. Usually if you see the slash sign, you're working on IXL, you're typing something in a Word document, but please know that that does mean division. The other way we show division is in a fraction. So this is 4 over 2. And we'll get into fractions later in the school year, but know that yes, this is a fraction bar, but a fraction bar is division. Okay? So all of these things we're going to practice in today's lesson. There's a lot of stuff here. All right, so for a minute, there's a lot on that screen. All I want to focus on is actually the top. Okay, And these are going to be your rules for multiplication and division. And before we go into them, what I do want you to notice, though, is that this box right here and this box right here say the exact same thing. The only difference is that I have a multiplication sign here and I have division signs here. Okay? Otherwise, they're the exact same rules. All right, so what we're going to do now, or what we're going to do first, is deal only with situations where we are taking one number with one sign and another number with that same sign and either multiplying or dividing them. So when I have a positive number times a positive number, I end up with a positive answer. When I have a negative number times a negative number, I still end up with a positive answer. So when my first number is positive and my second number is positive, my answer will be positive. When my first number is negative and my second number is negative, my answer will be positive. When we move over here into division, it's the exact same thing. When my first number is positive and my second number is positive and I divide them, my answer will be positive. When my first number is negative and I divide it by my second number that's negative, I still have a positive answer, okay? And so we're going to try a couple examples here so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And for now, I'm only going to deal with the multiplication sign. Okay, so here I have a positive 11 and a positive 9. Well, I know that my answer is going to be positive. So what's 11 times 9? 99. Now, if it makes you feel better, you can put a plus sign in front of it. You don't have to. As you're first learning your negative rules, it may be a good idea to go ahead and decide what your sign is first, because these are not the only rules. We have more to go over. And then do your numbers. So I'll show you an example. So here we have negative 11 and negative 9. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive. So I determine my sign. What's 11 times 9? 99. So two different problems, same exact answer. Here I have a negative 6 times negative 8. Negative times negative is going to be positive. 6 times 8 is 48. Here I have an exponent, but here's what I need you to know. How do I write out 4 to the second power in expanded form? Well, all it is 4 times 4. And so that's positive 4 times positive 4, which is going to be positive 16. And again, you do not have to write this plus sign in front of all of these numbers. I'm just doing it to show you, hey, we know that this is positive. So here I have positive 13 times positive 5, and that is going to be positive 65. Okay? Now I have here another exponent, and I want to show it to you. You want to make sure you expand it out. What this is saying is negative 5 times negative 5. And so what does that equal? Positive 25. And you'll see here how I use the X, and here I wrote parentheses to show them next door to each other. Here I have positive 2 times positive 1, which is going to be positive 2. Here I have 12 times 0, and anything times 0 is 0. And just an important note, 0 is neither positive nor negative. Or negative, sorry. All right, we're going to do the exact same thing, except this time it's going to be all division. And so you saw here, I showed multiplication many different ways. I used an X, I used parentheses, I used exponents, I used the dot, on and on and on. Now I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to show division in a lot of different ways. So here I have positive 15 divided by positive 3, and that's going to be positive 5. Here I have negative 27 divided by negative 3. I know my answer is going to be positive. 27 divided by 3 is 9. Here I have negative 49 divided by negative 7. Well, negative divided by negative, I know my answer will be positive. 49 divided by 7, the answer is 7. Here I have positive 24 divided by positive 6. Positive divided by a positive, I know is positive. 24 divided by 6 is 4. Negative 55 divided by negative 11. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 55 divided by 11 is 5. Here I have positive 25 divided by positive 1. Positive divided by a positive is a positive. 25 divided by 1 is 25. Here I have 0 divided by positive 24, which is just going to be 0. Okay? So these were all situations where both numbers had the same sign. They were both positive or they were both negative. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when the signs are different. Okay? So if you noticed, in our last answer, everything turned out to be positive. In this situation, when we have different signs, everything's going to turn out to be negative. So again, this multiplication box and this division box, they're actually going to say the exact thing. The exception is that this is going to be multiplication over here, and this is going to be division over here. Okay, so let's take a look at what this all means. So here, this is saying when your first number is positive and you're multiplying it by a second number that's negative, your answer is going to be negative. Flip that around. When your first number is negative and you're multiplying it by your second number that's positive, your answer will still be negative. Okay, so if you only have one number that's negative, it's going to be a negative answer. Same thing over here with division. Your first number is positive, divided by your second number that's negative, the answer is negative. Over here, flip it around. When your first number is negative and you divide it by your second number that's positive, your answer is negative. Okay, so again, if you only have one negative number and you're multiplying or dividing, your answer should be negative. All right, here we go. So we have multiplication on the left-hand side, which we're going to do first. So I have positive 3 times negative 5. Positive times a negative is a negative. 3 times 5 is 15. Negative 6 times 4. Negative times a positive is a negative. 6 times 4 is 24. Negative 5 times positive 7. Negative times a positive is a negative. 5 times 7, 35. Negative 12 times 11. Negative times a positive should be a negative, and let's work out 12 times 11 over here. Oops. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 1 is 1. So that's going to give us 2, 3, 1. All right, so negative 132. Okay? Now, you'll see here how I have this exponent going on again, except this time it's to the third power. So let me expand it out. Negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Okay, now I'm actually going to take this to a different page just for a second because I want to show this to you without having to squeeze it in. Okay, so this was the problem. Now, I'm going to expand that out. Negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So order of operations tells us if we have multiplication and division, we start from left to right. So what is negative times a negative? That's a positive. What's 3 times 3? 9. Okay, bring down the rest of the problem. So I have, let me erase that positive sign so we don't think we're doing plus. So I have 9 times negative 3. Now I have positive 9 times a negative 3. That means my answer is going to be negative. 9 times 3 is 27. So I'm going to go back and record my answer of negative 27. Okay. All right, so right here I have the same situation happening, negative 2 to the third power. And again, I'm going to go ahead and open up a new slide here so that I can write it out nice and big. So first thing is I'm going to expand it out. That's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Order of operations tells us start at the left. I'm going to take the first two numbers. A negative times a negative is a positive. 2 times 2 is 4. Bring down that remaining negative 2. I have a positive times a negative. That's a negative. 4 times 2 is 8. So my answer is negative 8. All right. Over here, I have negative 21 times positive 1. That's going to be negative 21. 0 times negative 33. Well, anything times 0 is 0. And remember, 0 is not positive and it's not negative. All right, let's move on to the same thing but with division. So here I have positive 33 divided by negative 11. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. 33 divided by 11 is 3. Negative 64 divided by positive 8. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. Oops. And 64 divided by 8 is 8. Negative 70 divided by 7. Negative divided by a positive is negative. 70 divided by 7 is 10. Negative 55 divided by 11. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. 55 divided by 11 is 5. 20 divided by negative 4. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. 20 divided by 4 is 5. You'll see how I'm talking through this by first asking myself, what is my sign? Second, solve the problem. Negative 81 divided by 9. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. 81 divided by 9 is 9. 0 divided by negative 7, doesn't matter, it's going to be 0. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of those two there. Now, we're going to make this a tad bit harder by adding in letters. And we call these letters variables. And we'll get to variables later on in the school year. You don't have to worry about that terminology right now. But it's going to be the same exact rules that apply. All I'm going to do is add in one extra step. So here, the problem that I give you is P times Q. And you may be thinking, well, those aren't numbers. I don't understand what you're talking about. Well, up here, I'm telling you what P is, I tell you what Q is, and I tell you what R is. So what we need to do in this first column here is rewrite this problem using the proper numbers. And the way that we do that is by taking out the letter and putting in the numbers in parentheses. So P is negative 3, and so I'm going to put it in parentheses. Then I'm going to put the times sign. Okay, so I did that. Now the Q is positive 4, and I'm going to put it in parentheses. Now I can go ahead and solve. Negative 3 times 4, negative times a positive is a negative. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay? So I keep the same operations and all that. I just put the numbers in parentheses instead of the actual letters. Okay, so P times R. So P is negative 3 and R is negative 5. Okay, go over here. Negative 3 times negative 5. Negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 5 is 15. R to the third power. What I'm going to do over here is instead of writing negative 5 to the third power, I'm actually going to go ahead and expand it out. Okay, so it's going to be negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. Okay, so my first two, like we did before, negative 5 times negative 5 is going to be positive 25. And then positive 25 times negative 5, that's going to be negative 125. Okay, here we have P times Q times R. So this is P is going to be negative 3, Q is going to be 4, and R is negative 5. Now, we're going to solve this the exact same way as when we solved with the exponents, okay? Take the first two first. Negative 3 times positive 4, that's going to be negative 12. And then bring over the negative 5. Negative 12 times negative 5. Well, negative times a negative, that's going to be a positive. 12 times 5 is going to be 60. Here we have Q times R. Q is 4. R is negative 5. Okay, so positive times a negative is going to be a negative. 4 times 5 is going to be 20. All right, now over here I have P to the second power. I'm going to go ahead and write it out into expanded form. P is negative 3, and to the second power. So I have negative 3 times negative 3. Negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, this number 7 here is a very, very interesting case. What you should notice off the bat is that that negative sign is outside of the parentheses, okay? And that's important. We're not going to deal with the negative sign until the very end. So the first thing I'm going to do is write my negative sign over here. Now I have to do r to the third power. R is negative 5. So I'm going to expand it out. Negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. Okay? I'm going to ignore that negative sign for just a minute there, okay? First thing I'm going to do, negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. Then I'm going to bring over my other negative 5, 25 times negative 5, and that's going to be, let's see, where can I write it? I'm going to write it over here. That's going to be negative, you know what? I'm going to make this a brand new slide. I'm sorry, let me go ahead and do this problem again. Okay, this is our original problem. So I have negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. Okay, here we go. I'm going to ignore this guy on the end. Negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. And I'm going to bring this guy down here, and I'm going to bring down this negative here. Okay? Now, you can look at this a couple different ways. You can now see this as negative 25, or you can just keep the parentheses around 25. 25 times negative 5 is going to be negative 125. And I have that negative outside. Now, you see how they're next door to each other here? They're next door neighbors. That means multiplication. What is negative times a negative? It is a positive, and the number stays 125. I shouldn't have tried to squeeze that in there. I am so sorry. That's a tricky one. So your answer is going to be positive 125. Now here we have the same thing, except we're going to the second power this time. So let me see what p is, and I will work it out. Okay, so p is negative 3. So I believe this was the problem. All right, so I'm going to keep that negative outside, and then I have negative 3 times negative 3. Okay? Ignore this negative on the outside for right now. Negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 3 is 9. Then I have this negative here. Negative times a positive is a negative, and you keep the number. So your answer is going to be negative 9. All right. And we did that, and we did that. All right, so now we have the same exact thing, but in division this time, okay? So let's go ahead, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put them in parentheses, okay? We're going to substitute them and then solve it. So here I have negative 10 divided by c, and c is negative 2. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Here I have a, which is 24, divided by 8. Positive divided by a positive is a positive. 24 divided by 8 is 3. Here I have a divided by b. So I have 24 divided by negative 4. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. 24 divided by 4 is 6. So my answer is negative 6. Look at this negative sign, okay, outside or next door to the a. I'm going to write the negative, but I still put a in parentheses, just like that. Okay, and then I have my b, which is negative 4. Okay, now go back to order of operations for a minute. Remember, it tells you when you have multiplication and division, you start from left to right. I want you to think about this as the negative being multiplied to the positive 24, okay? So, what is negative times positive? It's negative, and you keep the number. So what this says is negative 24 divided by negative 4, okay? Negative divided by a negative is a positive. 24 divided by 4 is 6. Now this one here has multiple steps. Remember, order of operations, you're always going to do your exponents first, okay? I I gotta see what b is. All right, so we have b, which is, and I'm going to expand it out, which is going to be -4 times -4, and all of that fraction bar division over c squared, and I'm going to expand it out, so I have -2, -2. All right, let me start solving here. I'm going to change colors. -4 divided by -4 is 16, fraction bar. -2 divided by -2 is +4. 16 divided by 4, that is going to be 4, or +4. All right, here I have 10 divided by, and c is -2. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. 10 divided by 2 is 5. All right, that is the end of this lesson. It was a lot, so if you have any questions, make sure you ask me in class.